Tales of Mithrym.
Den of Thieves, read by Skye Alley, Part 7, Dash. Well, it seems to me that we do not really have many options now, then. Elvin was sitting in a chair in the back room of the inn. Ducky sat beside him as Derval paced back and forth. Back in the main room, the sounds of shouting had died away, and it seemed as though the crowd were leaving. "I'm not getting thrown in prison," Derval said flatly. "I'm doing just as your officer friend said, and I'm getting out of here as quick as I can." "Aye to that," Ducky growled. "Well, we are not getting out any time today," Elvin said, looking at the fading light through the small window of the room. "I say we get settled for the night." He stood up and dusted himself off. "How about we all get a good sleep under our belts ready for tomorrow?" Derval scowled and headed for the stairs. Ducky stretched and made to follow. Elvin waited, listening to the sounds of the streets outside. He sighed a heavy sigh, then made his way up too. Derval stood in her room, caught in deep thought. Through the walls, she could hear the sounds of Ducky and Elvin getting ready for bed. She looked at her small collection of things. A patched bag, a few provisions, an axe, and a pardon that was worth less than the paper it was signed on, apparently. She could just leave. That was not much to sneak out with. She could make her way to the gates easily enough. Maybe if she picked up some extra food on the way out, then she could last a few days in the countryside and find her way back to another town. A big one. She could get lost again. She sighed. She did not have to be treated like this. She began packing up her things and made her way over to the door. The sounds of footsteps were still echoing around the building. There must be someone still up. She crossed the room over to the window. The shutters had been relatched. She would need to be very quiet indeed if she were to use that way. She placed her bag down softly onto the floor and pocketed her hatchet again. Then, with every ounce of concentration, she lifted up the sash and pulled open the window. The wood slid on its tracks and came to rest. She stopped, waiting to see if there was any sound of stirring from the other rooms. After a minute or two, she continued. A careful bit of work, and she was able to unlatch the shutter. It flung back. She hurried to try and catch it before it could hit the wall. Her hand grasped the timber hard. Crash! Derval winced. The sound echoed down the street. Already she could hear sounds outside. People seemed to have been roused immediately. But wait, the crash had not come from the shutter. She opened her eyes again and looked. She was holding it a good few inches from the wall. Then she saw, far below, a bright orange light was spilling out into the street. A small figure was stumbling out again. Flashbacks to the night before ran through her mind. She crossed back to the door. Opening it, she saw Elvin hurriedly attaching his sword to his belt. Ducky slammed out of his room too, sword in hand. Far below, they could hear the sound of shouting. "Thief! Thief!" Miss Green's voice echoed around them. The three looked at each other and then, all together, ran downstairs. They found the landlady amongst a pile of broken odds and ends and could see the side door wide open. Staff and family were hurrying in to look. "He went that way!" She pointed through the door to the street outside. "So it's not," broke in a man, pointing at Derval. "No, I saw him! He went that way!" Miss Green was sobbing as she looked at the destruction left behind. Derval smiled. Elvin looked at her and then to Ducky. "Come on," he said, and sprang forward through the doorway. The other two quickly ran on behind him. The night air was cold on their faces. All along the street, light began to spill out from the houses as doors and windows were opened to look. Derval, Ducky, and Elvin were followed out by a handful of men and women from the inn. As they continued, though, they were joined by more and more inhabitants of the town, until at last a whole crowd of them were running together. Ahead of them they could still see the small figure. It seemed almost to be hopping from cobble to cobble, swaying with an ease of movement and a light step. "We have him now," Elvin called out as they saw the gateway to the docks ahead. Two men were standing on guard and had turned to look at the commotion. They both came round to block the archway, but just as the mysterious figure was coming close to them, it suddenly leapt up. Gasps were heard from the crowd as the small figure landed right on top of the wall. Silhouetted by the night, it seemed to be dancing with delight. Then it made a gesture to the crowd and began running along the wall towards the rooftops of the houses nearby. "No, not this time!" Dervil shouted. She spied a number of barrels beside a nearby house and leapt on top of them. She then proceeded to climb as quick as she could. Her hands met with wood and brickwork as she made her way up. The small figure was not far from her now. It seemed to be moving with a tremendous speed, though. "Let's get a good look at you," she snarled as she brought herself round towards it. The figure turned on the spot and was trying to run back the other way, but something in the uneven surface must have caught its foot, as suddenly it pitched sideways. Hanging for a moment, balanced on one foot. "Elvin!" Dervil called out as she jumped over to the wall. "Get ready to catch!" Elvin duly positioned himself. Dervil inched forwards and reached her arm out. "Hello, my lad," she said, and grabbed at the hood. In a moment, though, everything seemed to spin. A small hand suddenly gripped Dervil's arm. She was pulled forwards and lost her footing. She did not stop reaching, though, and caught fabric tight in her grip. The two of them tumbled together. At ground level, Dervil landed hard in Elvin's arms, knocking them both to the cobbles. As they got up, there were gasps and shouts from the crowd. They dusted themselves off, then turned to look at what was causing all the commotion. Ducky was holding the figure tight round its waist in a bear hug. The hood had fallen from its head, and underneath they could see... "Ibis, preserve us!" Elvin shouted. "Is that..." Ducky beamed. "It's a kobold!"
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.